Good afternoon. This is Amber Limser. I'm in my fourth podcast here about choice-based art education with my fifth grade students. We're in our second week of basically creating our artworks, and we're starting to finish up projects. I want to talk to you first a little bit about something that came up this week in a discussion as I was talking about my classroom environments with someone that I know. He asked me a good question. He said, do children just do cliche projects, or do they come up with these inspirational, individualistic pieces? I think the answer to that question can be kind of broad. Some of my students are really creating artwork that is very individualistic and very key to who they are as individuals and their culture, and then some are doing some kind of cliche projects. Is this a problem? I think some artists would find that in creativity we want them to be more individualistic and we want them to think outside of the box. But for some students, I think creating a cliche project first is kind of important for them to build upon. I think that as they start creating more, they get more comfortable with being in their expressive states, and they will gather information and start building upon their own individuality. A lot of students are not as creative as other students, so do I want to scorch their creativity by saying, oh, well, this is too cliche and you can't do this and blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to tell them what they can and cannot do when it comes to their projects, because I want them to be interested in what they are doing. But I want them also to start thinking about how they can relate and how they can make their own individual projects without seeming like copycats in a certain way. But I think the key here is, are they benefiting from this program? And if they are making cliche pieces, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, the Dada movement was kind of interesting. Artists basically put a toilet in the middle of the room and said, hey, this is art. So what do we consider, true art, and what do we consider like a cliche? I mean, it's really up to the viewer and what we think. I don't think it's necessarily about creating individual pieces all the time. Sometimes you have to have stepping stones into what you are looking for, that search for a certain type of method or project or something that they're really interested in. Sometimes it's more about process than it is about creating these fantastic pieces of artworks. So to me, a cliche artwork doesn't always necessarily mean it's a bad artwork. It just means that it's a stepping stone to where we want to go. For this age level, I think it is important to look at other artworks, create artworks, and see if you can justify a lot of apprentices during the Renaissance era. They practiced under an artist and did a lot of artwork for that artist. That wasn't necessarily their idea, but they became very individual artists on their own. So to me, a cliche piece of artwork is not necessarily not artwork. Are we saying that it is the most inquiry-based art project? Am I getting a lot of self-expression? Well, it depends on how you look at that. Just because they create a cliche piece of artwork doesn't necessarily mean that they're not expressing themselves in a certain way. What are they drawing? What are they looking at? These are things that, as an educator, I have to inquire about. Is this artwork necessarily cliche, or is it telling me something more in depth about this person? Are they just trying to get through this project, or is it something that they're really interested in? As an art teacher, I think it's very important for us to have to pick up on that. Some students are not going to be as advanced as other students. Some students are going to focus more on one project than others. And I mean, that's just how the storyline goes. In a choice-based atmosphere, they're choosing their projects, even though I tell them that we want it to be individualistic and we want them to be their own. We don't want to plagiarize or do anything that might get us in trouble with copyright laws and whatnot. So we have to think individually. If my students are creating artworks based on another artwork, I don't necessarily think that's cliche. I don't think if they draw me flowers that's necessarily cliche. Yes, you're going to get flowers. Yes, little girls are going to draw flowers. Little boys are going to draw Ninja Turtles. It's things that they are interested in. And that to me is inquiry. One of my students is doing a lot of projects about video games. He's very much into video games, and we were talking about how that is a subculture of the culture that he's working on. He did a poster of a video game that he really liked, but then he designed a mask for one of the characters in the video game. So he came up with his own mask. He tested out different types of materials for making his mask. We had paper at first. He really didn't like it because it bent. It didn't stand well. So I found him some poster board, and we took a mat cutout and we made the mask, and then he colored on it. He used some different materials, thought about how he wanted it to look, and made his own character mask for that video game. So to me, even though we started out with a very cliche project of, he's talking about a character that he sees in a video game that he's doing, but it advanced on into another project that he did with a mask that was made just for that specific character. So we looked at it almost in a fashion aspect. We kind of evolved from this simple poster of a reproduction almost of this character to him making a mask, which I thought was really, really awesome. The other great thing is that he is one of my special needs students, and so it's been kind of a eye-opening experience for me to see him kind of grow as an individual artist and think of these cool ideas for how he can relate to this video game culture and what he can do. And he wants to start thinking about designing his own things for video games, like characters and whatnot. So this is really opening up a new chapter in a book for him. And the fact that he's enjoying making these things based on video game characters, even though it's kind of a cliche thing, kind of like a comic book or a character out of a movie. Yes, we started off on that base, but we are growing. We are inquiring about the things that go on during video game making and all these different materials. So to me, the essential questions that we're asking as teachers is vitally important, but we shouldn't be really stressed over making cliche pieces of artwork. To me, it's about them inquiring on something that they're really interested in. If they're really interested in it, they're going to research it. So I really think that it is vitally important that we allow them to make and create. Sometimes we're not always going to get individual pieces, but I think as we allow those cliche pieces to exit their system or let them get it out of their system, they start creating more individual things that become more self-expressive, more in tune to who they are as individuals. So I don't want to squash that creativity as we go through this process. And I think as a parent or a teacher, we have to be open to these sorts of cliche types of art and allow these students to express what they need to express first, and then possibly build on how we can turn this cliche artwork into something more meaningful, more powerful for us. As teachers, we have to inquire about our students and what they're interested in. We have to help them grow as individuals. We have to be a backseat, a co-captain to who they are. And that's one thing about a choice-based art classroom, is you are kind of a co-captain into their life as an artist in the classroom. So we have to be able to allow them to guide the way and then kind of help them steer in the directions they need to go. That being said, back to the question about, what about all the kids that make these cliche pieces of artwork? Is that really art? For me, that's not really an issue. Let's get those creativity genes going. If we want to draw flowers all day, for 2 weeks, if that's what we need to do, let's do that. But let's not squash all those hopes and dreams of making amazing art because I want you to make something other than flowers. Georgia O'Keeffe made beautiful drawings of flowers and then elaborated on it in kind of a yonic sense. And, just the idea behind her love for the flower and behind her love for the desert and whatnot became these beautiful masterpieces. We have hundreds of images of cow skulls because of Georgia O'Keeffe, kind of a cliche art form, to me anyway. but because she elaborated and she came so in, and the direction behind her artwork was just so interesting. So I don't think as a teacher that we should squash hopes and dreams just because we don't want to see cliche hearts and butterflies. To me, it's more about the work that we're producing, and if the students are inquiring about things, should we crush hopes and dreams about cliche artworks as long as they are attempting to build upon those hopes and dreams? I don't think so. I think as a teacher, we need to be open to all processes of going through artistic process. And so we need to be open to those cliche pieces of art and not be so closed-minded to thinking that all art should be different. Sometimes they're just building blocks upon what can become something magnificent. In other tunes, I'm going to turn the page now to a different topic. My students are starting to finish up their projects on culture. We're seeing a lot of great stuff happening. We're starting to fill out exit sheets. The exit sheets ask questions like the title of the artwork, what the materials they used were, did they like and dislike the project, and what did they like and dislike, and how they're going to grade themselves. I usually do a happy face, kind of a middle face, kind of like, it's okay, and then a sad face, and they have to circle one, and then tell me why they gave those examples. So we're starting to work into that. I'm really excited. We're still doing a lot of researching, a lot of processing, of learning, using materials, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Some students are more advanced than others, so it's becoming quite interesting. The classroom is becoming a little chaotic. There's a lot of things going on. I am bouncing like a bumblebee to each little flower and taking in the information and trying to help as I can. It's kind of crazy how many projects are going on that are so individual and some that are working together. So we're bouncing between whole groups, small groups, individual needs. And it's just been a very interesting process. I've also noted that it's been kind of crazy and we've had to really watch the materials that we're using. I've had to go in and restock the Sculpture Center a few times already because they are just using up material. So we might need to talk about waste and time management and how we use materials. That's one thing I need to inquire more about with them and talk to them more about. I've been doing demonstrations at the beginning of class about drop testing things to make sure it's sturdy enough, how to clean up your centers better, how to use watercolor correctly on the paper and not just dip your brush down into it. So we're doing a lot of process and learning how to use tools a little more in depth. I think that if you open up a choice-based learning center, that you have to have kind of springboards, which I do have springboards set up at each center, giving directions on how to use things and what processes they should do to clean up their centers. But it's vitally important that you go over those things before you start centers, because if you do not, you're kind of like lost and they're kind of lost. So it's vitally important to have, like I said in my first podcast, that you structure your materials correctly, because you will find if you have a downfall or a whoops moment that you forgot to do something in your classroom, it definitely shows when your kids come in. You have to have your classroom set up very well to have it flow correctly. The materials need to be available for the students. You need to have your ducks in a row. Labeling is quite important. So if you're thinking about doing a choice-based art classroom and you're thinking about inquiry, make sure that you have your classroom set up and ready to go for your students. I cannot emphasize that enough. Labeling is really good. Having all your materials available for your students, having things ready, having whatever theme, if you're doing a theme, having that ready to go, having things for them to look at. Visuals are vitally important. Also be looking at the way students are reacting to certain projects. Are they self-reflecting? Are they talking to their peers? These are all ways to inquire. These are all ways of knowing if the choice-based classroom is working, and you're inquiring about them and how they're doing and watching them inquire about other things that other students are working on. So we've got a lot of different questions being asked. We're observing a lot of different things. So things to think about. Just keep that in mind. I'm really excited to see how this is kind of wrapping up for my 5th graders and how this is going to all play out. It's been a really good couple weeks, and I'm really excited to see the end product. Anyway, have a great day.